Hello and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour. I'm a member of the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters, one of the civic partners for our show. Today we have Kathleen Stein, the president of the local league, in the studio with us. Kathy, welcome back to North Country Matters.
Thanks, Donna.
So, as we mentioned in our last show, New York State Legislature passed 935 same-as bills this year and sent them on to Governor Cuomo for signing. That signing continues even as of this morning. I mean, it's hard to do a show like this and keep it current if you aren't paying attention to what happened this morning. So anyway, we're in the middle of early voting for the very first time in New York. You voted early on the first day, Kathy.
Yes,
Tell us how
I did.
that went.
It went very well. My husband and I were the 13th and the 15th voters in St. Lawrence County. The staff was really psyched and everybody was very excited about it. It was very smooth. The new electronic poll books are fantastic. They work very well. The new printers and things for the ballots and whatnot. It was very smooth, very smooth. So I urge everyone to get out there and,
Early vote.
take advantage.
Yeah, well, according to the latest statistics I read this morning, 51,000 people cast their ballot in New York State either on Saturday or Sunday, which was the first weekend of early voting. So lots of people are excited by this new opportunity, and we won't know until after Election Day when they sort out the numbers how many folks actually voted early, but it looks like something that is going to be a really big advantage next year during the presidential election because in lots of places there's going to be, it'll be overwhelming if they don't have early voting. So we're in good shape for that.
Yeah.
So even as of this very late date, there are still new election laws that are being signed into law and that we have to talk about. So some of them we've been waiting for a long time, haven't we, Kathy?
We surely have, we surely have. Yes, finally, and we were on the last show that we taped, we were still rather on tenterhooks about the change of party enrollment deadline, but the governor did sign it. So now it is official. February 14th will be the date by which you can, up until that date, you can change your party enrollment or designate a party to be enrolled. So that's a huge improvement right there.
And that will be to be in time for the presidential primary in New York State, which is on April 28th. So we ran into this 4 years ago. People were disappointed that they missed the deadline because they wanted to vote in the other party's primary. This year, or rather I should say next year, it'll be a much compressed time frame, so there'll be many more opportunities to make that change.
Absolutely, absolutely. Also, a couple of bills to improve, reading the ballot, making the ballot more, easier to read. And also another bill that will require ballots to inform voters when the ballot has two sides, when there's, because a lot of people miss various kinds of I can't come up with the right word.
For example, this fall in Messina, voters are voting on whether or not about the hospital, and that's on the back side of the ballot.
Resolutions.
So if you're in Messina, you need to flip that ballot over, but it's not always obvious that there's something on the back of the ballot, which is often it might be an amendment, it might be a ballot item of some other kind. It isn't actually an office, but it's still something that people need to take an interest in and give their opinion on.
Exactly, and in fact, in Canton also, there is a resolution on the back having to do with the highway superintendent.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
So this very year we have a two-sided ballot. And the third bill that will require boards of elections to post sample ballots online before an election is held. Now, St. Lawrence County Board of Elections does this already, but apparently not all boards of elections have been doing it, but that's a very handy
Yeah, and for example, here in St. Lawrence County, there's, I think, over about 100 different ballots because there's 100 different election districts, so each one is a little bit different, and you don't want to not walk in and not know what you're supposed to be looking at. So it's good that that we're doing that already.
Right. Then there have been some election law. In fact, this morning I have printed out the email that Donna sent me because breaking news here. A bill that requires all candidates and committees to electronically file campaign finance data with the State Board of Elections. And that was just signed yesterday. And the measure also ends the minimum threshold of $1,000 for campaigns to file. So in other words, this greatly expands the information that voters can get on what campaign, what kind of finances campaigns have. And it also removes the requirement that filings be sent to the county board of elections. And this is, good for county boards of elections. It's one less thing they have to deal with. But it also makes it very centralized where voters can get this information.
And it also is good for candidates because sometimes candidates inadvertently have forgotten to do that part. They've sent in the state information, they've forgotten to do the county part, and not because they were trying to confuse anybody, but just because the law was confusing.
Yes, yes.
So.
Also, the governor approved signed bills that require local boards of elections to publish more information on contribution limits and special elections. One, requires local boards of elections to tabulate and publish contribution limits for all county, town, city, village, again, more information for people running for office and information for voters as well. And the other measure requires local boards of elections to provide additional notice and information ahead of special elections, which is the kind of thing that, gets by people, under the radar. So that's important. Then we just have an amazing range of things here. Governor Cuomo signed a bill codifying the federal Johnson Amendment into New York state law. The Johnson Amendment bars nonprofit entities like religious organizations from endorsing candidates or donating to political campaigns. And you might wonder, why does New York State need to do this? Well, the measure comes after President Donald Trump in 2017 approved an executive order that was aimed at loosening the Johnson Amendment's restrictions on nonprofit participation. Also, related to presidential matters, the bill was signed that ends the loophole, the so-called presidential pardon loophole. Excuse me. And the governor stated, "No one is above the law, and New York will not turn a blind eye to criminality."
Well, of course, it could be because we're a Democratic state and it's a Republican president, but
there's something to that. But this loophole, and I was puzzled about this when I first saw it, because I thought presidential pardons only apply to federal crimes. So what loophole can there be? The loophole involves the double jeopardy shield, and that you can't be charged twice for the same crime. This removes that, so that even if someone has been received a pardon for a federal crime from the presidential pardon, the state can still charge them under state law for activity related to a criminal charge related to the same behavior. So that is what that means. That was the loophole that was closed.
Well, this was a good year, depending on your point of view, of course, for closing some gun loopholes here in New York State. And one of the bills that Governor Cuomo signed gives police agencies the better ability to sift out-of-state records of mentally ill people who are seeking to obtain a firearms license here in New York State. And the National Instant Criminal Background Check System only flags people who have been involuntarily committed for mental health problems. Sometimes those people slip through that background check, but this will allow New York State policing agencies to do a better job of checking their actual record. And under current law, individuals can also apply for a firearm license in the county in which they reside, regardless of the location of the permanent residence. So this law closes that loophole by allowing law enforcement to review their out-of-state records for dangerously mentally ill people before granting a firearm license. And although it's not exactly a law, Attorney General James issued a cease and desist order to gun component websites to ban the so-called ghost guns in New York State that are untraceable. A lot of gun crimes in New York State are actually committed by these guns that come in from out-of-state area that haven't been registered and they don't have any paperwork. And these gun component websites were facilitating that, but no longer, thanks to the Attorney General.
Okay, we have a number of laws in the healthcare category. One measure requires pharmacy to notify patients of Class 1 drug recalls by the Food and Drug Administration within a week. And, you know, this is important because the risks are especially high to elderly patients and who take a lot of, you know, long-lasting medications and things like that, and they really need to get this information in a timely manner. Another law, and this one stunned me, stunned me that we needed this law, bars ambulance and first response service providers from disclosing or selling the information of patients to third parties. This closes what amounts to a loophole in patient privacy laws that allows service providers to sell information for marketing purposes, including addresses, phone numbers, prescriptions, and medical history. As I say, I was speechless to discover that this
the whole
could be done.
privacy law loophole problem is a huge one because it seems like every day someone finds a new way to exploit your private information,
Yeah.
whether it's medical or anything else. And so tightening up those laws is really an important thing.
It surely is, it surely is. Another new law is aimed at curtailing expenses related to out-of-pocket emergency medical charges, and anybody who has had to make a trip to the emergency room knows that you often get an unpleasant surprise later. This requires health insurance companies to ensure that when policyholders and enrollees receive care from another provider, the patient will not be charged the larger out-of-pocket costs they would have incurred from a participating provider. Because obviously if it's an emergency, you don't have time to check whether that person is in your network. The bill also requires charges for emergency services at hospitals to be subject to an independent resolution process, and this is very helpful as well, which was previously created by the state's surprise medical bill law, which was enacted back in 2014, but this brings emergency coverage and care under that law. Also, there is a bill. New York has begun already offering free coaching and nicotine replacement therapy to e-cigarette users who are looking to stop vaping. And this has obviously become, you know, a more urgent thing after this nationwide outbreak of vaping illnesses, which have killed 33 people and hospitalized more than 1,500. So this, you know, expands the services that
It does, and it's been an ongoing problem, not just in New York State, but lots of other states. And in fact, New York State has tried by executive order to close some of these vaping loopholes. They're back in the courts now. So at least we have created a system to help people who are aware of that and are trying to stop, whether or not, however it works out in the courts as far as actually outlawing these products.
Yeah. And sort of related to emergency care and whatnot, a bill that increases the special benefits for family members after the accidental deaths of police officers and firefighters killed in the line of duty, and that's, you know, that is always a good thing.
Yeah, it is. So New York State has added some new laws under the safety and education area. One law that actually goes into effect starting in November is that child safety seating in vehicles, if any child under the age of 2 will be required to be placed in a rear-facing car seat. Up to this point, it's depended on the size of the child, the weight of the child, and all that. Now it is across the board. Under 2, you must be in a rear-facing seat. And it's, you know, designed to make sure that these children have protection in the event of a car crash. Officials are reminding folks, if you have to go buy a car seat and if you're thinking about picking up a used one, make sure that there are no missing or expired parts and that this car seat is actually approved for use right now, because sometimes car seats have gone out of, they're no longer legal because they don't do the job. So make sure if you're picking up a used one that it does meet these requirements. Another measure, which is really important, requires that youth tackle football programs provide parents and guardians with information on concussions and subconcussive blows. There's been a growing concern in the last few years over the effect of concussions on developing brains in young people, and unfortunately tackle football is still one of the major ways that this is happening for kids. Early in September, Governor Cuomo signed a law establishing a 9/11 Remembrance Day in New York schools and allowing for a brief moment of silence in public schools on that anniversary. And that's always it's always good to remember our past and the significant events in our past.
Yes, absolutely. On now to some bills having to do with women's issues. Women who are breastfeeding are now exempt from jury duty. They will have to provide a doctor's note from a doctor to verify, and the service can't have been postponed or excused before, but this is just one less thing that new mothers potentially might have to deal with. Also, and a very important move after years of advocacy from the ACLU Women's Rights Project, the Empire Justice Center, NYCLU, New York State Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the right to call 911 bill was signed by the governor. And this brings protections to New Yorkers from overly broad public nuisance laws that have enabled landlords to evict the victims of domestic violence along with the perpetrator. And also so they have the right to call help and without that being classified as being a public nuisance, which is, you would think would be common sense, but has not worked that way. And also the new law allows a landlord to go to court to remove or evict the perpetrator of violence from a property while allowing the victim to stay, again, giving the victim protection and not making them homeless on top of everything else. The governor also signed legislation making it easier to prosecute some sex crimes by extending the statute of limitations for second and third degree rape. The new law extends the statute of limitations from 5 years to 20 years for second degree rape and from 5 years to 10 years for third degree rape. These are second and third degree rape can be charged in New York when a victim cannot consent to sex either because of age or disability. So that's good news as well. And finally, New York State became the first state to require companies to list ingredients on menstrual products. And I had to do a little research on this because I couldn't quite figure out what that would entail. But it's actually quite important. Requires companies to print a plain and conspicuous list of ingredients on all menstrual product packages. And we're talking about additives, things like wicking agents, deodorants, fragrances, things that people might have serious allergies to. And also anything that could have left a residue that again might be an allergy problem for people. Chlorine, for example, used to bleach fibers and whatnot that are in the products. So this is a good thing. The law goes into effect in 180 days, and companies will have 18 months to create new packaging to meet the requirement.
And as is often the case, when a state makes a law like this, because companies are selling products across state lines and across the country, everyone in the country will eventually have access to this information. I can remember a case probably about 20 years ago now where there was a real problem because some of these products were being made in a factory that also was making pesticides. And talk about the opportunity for cross-contamination.
Oh,
so anyway, these are things that are truly consumer protections that need to be done. Under criminal justice reform, 17-year-olds are now also covered by the Raise the Age law, which takes 17 and 16-year-olds mostly out of the adult criminal justice system. This is something that Under Sheriff Brooks Bigworth and I were just talking about in his conversation with the candidate. So he was talking about how that actually works here in St. Lawrence County because we don't have the facilities to house 16 and 17-year-olds separately. But the change started this month, and it's the second part of legislation from last year that raises the age of New York State criminal responsibility to 18. Under the legislation, young people charged with misdemeanors would have their cases tried in family court rather than in criminal court, which in many cases for these young people is very important because they have made a mistake. They are not career criminals at this point in their lives. So,
Right.
so hopefully that will that will help them to modify their ongoing behavior.
Right, right. A couple of automotive related laws. One blocks car leasing companies from assessing an early termination fee on a motor vehicle lease when the leaseholder dies.
Talk about early termination.
Yes, this was another one that had me shaking my head when I read it. But you know, television, internet, and phone providers are already banned from charging such fees. This law adds motor vehicle leases under that protection. And also, the next time you lose the key fob for your car, something we have all done, I'm sure, the out-of-pocket costs might not break the bank. A new law allows car dealerships to include the replacement of keys and key fobs to the list of items covered by service contracts. And since replacing a key fob can cost anywhere from $250 to almost $1,000, this is not an insignificant savings here. Yeah, those figures are according to the automotive dealer.
Well, I can testify to the $250 fee, having once replaced one of mine, and it was just about what it cost.
Yes,
so
yes.
I think twice before I lose them now.
That's right. And similarly, service contracts in New York are allowed to cover tire damage from road hazards, chips, cracks to windshields, and dents to the vehicle. So this, you know, this is nice. This is the kind of ordinary thing that you really need covered.
Right, and you're paying for these service contracts, so it makes sense to put the most frequently things that happen under that umbrella, and it just saves a lot of hassle down the road. One of the new laws that I think is particularly of interest to folks who live in Canton and Potsdam and other college communities is the State Liquor Authority now has to build and maintain a publicly available database of on-premise liquor licenses. So the bill actually allows residents to look up information on bars, or places that may be having live music or other spirits for like an outside patio, which it enables the police to also respond faster to noise complaints in a neighborhood. And these are real quality of life issues for folks who live in areas where there is this kind of activity, and the fact that you can look it up and find out whether someone has actually applied for and been granted a license gives you a lot of information ahead of time, and you know exactly what to complain about when you call your local police.
That's right.
And finally, what can only be thought of as a common sense law, the governor recently signed a bill that lowers the threshold from 0.10% of blood alcohol content to 0.08 for hunters. This is the same standard that is now used in determining whether a person driving a car or a boat is drunk, and it follows what other states have also done. But it doesn't take effect, unfortunately, until next year, so there may be drunk hunters in the woods this fall, but
be careful out there.
Be careful out there, yes, exactly. Please be careful out there, and please think twice before you pick up a gun and a beer and go to the woods.
Yes, yes.
For all of us.
For all of us, for everyone. Finally, a boost to our North Country Matters partner, the Potsdam Public Library. The governor approved a law meant to boost state funding for public libraries in economically struggling communities. The measure will provide state funding for up to 90% of a project's total approved cost for the construction of public libraries. Now, we don't need to construct a new library.
No, but there's going to be some renovations going on upstairs here, so they'll certainly be taking advantage of this, I'm sure.
That's right, because other projects, there are new eligibility requirements and can get up to 75% or greater of the total cost for the project. So that's I'm sure, good news to our hosts.
Yeah, and this is a great time for us to mention the fact that thanks to some community partners and some generous league members, we'll be giving out I voted stickers this year. Talk a little bit about that process, Kathy.
Yes, we had a very successful fundraising campaign this year. We received generous donations from Stewart's Shops, from the Golub Foundation of Price Chopper stores, from United Helpers, from the Andrew Goodman Foundation, the Vote Everywhere partners at St. Lawrence University, and also from several of our members, and including past president of the League of Women Voters, Nikki Jordan. And so we exceeded our goal for stickers, and so we hope, in fact I'll probably be able to order some more stickers, and you know, we hope now to have enough stickers on hand at the Board of Elections, not only for this election, which is, you know, a very local election and usually lower turnout, but also through the primaries next year, which will not be low turnout, we hope.
They won't.
So we're very grateful to our community partners, and you know, sport your sticker, wear it with pride.
That's right, because it reminds other people to get out and vote, and now that we have early voting, those stickers actually become advertisements more than just on election day.
That's right.
And that is just plain good citizenship. Voting is good citizenship, isn't it? So we've had a busy fall for the League of Women Voters. We've been doing it. We did a variety of conversations with candidates here on North Country Matters. We've gotten the stickers out. We've worked with the local Board of Elections to get out the information on early voting. And let's remind folks how they can join the League of Women Voters, Kathy.
That's right. You can visit our website, where there is a link to join online. You can also go to the State League website, and I know that Donna will also have my email on this show. I think you will, right?
Well, we'll have all the links. We'll have all the links as graphics for it, sure.
Right. And so if you want to get in touch with me, if you have more questions, feel free, and join us.
Yeah, 2020 is going to be a big year for the League. It's our 100th anniversary nationwide. Actually, the 100th anniversary for the New York State League is that anniversary is coming up next month.
It is November 19th, and the League of Women Voters of New York State will be 100 years old. So.
That's right, and there will be several very important elections next year, including a presidential primary, a state primary, and then the fall presidential election, which, if early indications are accurate, a lot of people are paying a lot of attention to already.
It seems to be the case.
So, Kathy, thank you again for coming in. This is, I think, the 4th time we've done a new law show here this year for North Country Matters, and the governor's pen is not broken, so we'll see what happens in 2020 when they get back into session again in January.
Absolutely.
So these conversations are a production of North Country Matters, which is filmed here in the Fred W. Cleveland Computer Center of the Potsdam Public Library. These shows are a civic collaboration between the League of Women Voters of St. Lawrence County and the Potsdam Public Library. Until next time, remember, our North Country Matters. Kathy, thank you so much.
Thank you.